the food business took that company from $44 million a year to $900 million a year organically. In that 2 or 3 year period in the new technology, they went to 64 pages at 3,000 feet a minute. Pricing went from, let's say, $32,000 to $9. I think you have to be quick. I think in many cases, if you're in a union environment, the rules set seniority, whatever. So it's and you have to be empathetic.
And Jack gave an analogy. He said, in school, you're graded your whole life.
Right.
In sports, whatever it may be, you're cut from the team if you're not good enough.
You got a corner office. Be who you are and be successful by leaving your problems and your mistakes behind.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Flow Syndicate Podcast. And I'm very excited to have on today a gentleman whose business background involves restructurings and really very important turnaround projects that have been big for the industry. So, Kevin Clarke, thank you so much for coming on the Flow Syndicate Podcast.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to, over a short period of time, sharing some of my thoughts on what's important, not only for senior executives, but emerging folks that want to pursue a career in any large business, or actually any small business. So thank you for taking the time. I look forward to sharing that information with you.
Oh, sure thing. So tell me a little bit, so where did this passion for business start? Let's get into your background from the beginning.
It started way back. I'm a Long Island kid. I had a neighbor who at the time was deeply involved in what we would call logistics or supply chain now. I don't remember what they called it then, but it fascinated me. And as a result, when it was my time to look at going to college, I looked at an enormous amount of colleges, and I found Niagara University right here near Buffalo, New York. And they had a major in logistics, transportation and logistics, so to say. And that's how I wound up at Niagara. And it was I was fascinated by it. At the time, it was an emerging science, if that's what you want to call it. And I graduated from there in '73 in an environment that was not good for kids coming out of college. The only kids that were getting job offers were nurses and accountants, and people like me in logistics. I had 7 job offers. So I wound up.
It's a good amount.
Yeah, I did. I wound up pursuing that as my basis, and then was, I think, both lucky and good at finding companies that provided me with enormous opportunities for a young guy to move through and do some things that I'm not sure you typically find today. So that's how I got there. I wound up working for Cheeseboro Ponds. And I was the first person to be sent into, again, people recognize this name, Ragu Foods. They bought it. It was a locally run company in Rochester, New York. Great product, $44 million a year. Spent 8 years there doing just about everything. We built 2 plants, and I left there when the business was almost $900 million. And they had a very strong philosophy of just challenging you to do what you could do. And as a result, I had great mentors. I had people that really I look back on that provided me a great pathway to do some things that perhaps young guys at my age, 22, 23, 24, don't get to do.
That's a great opportunity.
Spectacular.
So you said $900 million was when you left?
$900 million.
A question for me is, where were they before the 900 when you got started?
Well, they only had, it was a local company. So Ralph Ward was the predecessor before our friend at GE. who said you either had to have the number one or number two company in your field. So he bought regionally and grew and scaled nationally. And so here you are as an environment, a young kid being exposed to light speed.
Geometric growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I call it full battle stations. We were always on full battle stations.
Yeah.
So it was a defining start of a long 40-plus year career.
So going from small amounts of revenue to that size, you can only grow and do that externally through acquisitions, right? Because companies, I think they got two choices. You can either grow organically, which is necessary probably in some circumstances, or the external route, which is to do acquisitions. So that's more of your experience.
Well, in the food business, it was all organic. We took that company from $44 million a year to $900 million a year organically. It was like
How
I
do
said,
you do that?
you use every bit of subject matter expertise that the organization had, and it had tremendous marketing. It was a marketing company, really. They had Prince tennis racket, Bass shoes, Health Tech's baby clothes. I mean,
they have good brands.
They had everything, but that was just the food business. So you're in that environment, and it was stunning.
Wow.
Now, in the print business, that was a more staid business, and the only way you were going to grow the top line was to acquire companies that were either accretive to your growth or you had technology that you were buying outside, and you could buy that inside and control it better. So that I did a lot of that in the print business.
So back in that time period, what was technology like then versus now? How did you leverage technology?
Well, really, that was one of the challenges in the print business. The technology that was being deployed in most of the plants was at the end of its life cycle. There was a whole wave of new technology in the form of, a printing press for magazines, so to say, would produce 16 pages at 1,000 feet a minute. In that 2 or 3 year period in the new technology, they went to 64 pages at 3,000 feet a minute. Pricing went from, let's say, $32 1,000 to $9. So, and then you had automation, robotics. You had competition with China. China opened up, and they were providing huge Worldcolor. So it was, again, most people would look at that as a problem, and we did, but I learned so much on that you had to compete. You had to look at every component of every cost. I put together a waste program that became the model for all of our plants across the world. So, I tell kids, I shouldn't say kids, young executives, they're kids to me. They're younger than my kids.
Yeah.
But, having problems to solve is what you're there for. You're not there to just stamp. If you're there, you're in the wrong business. So,
You got to find, you got to love what you do. There's got to be some passion behind it. And I think with the plants, you're also dealing with the unions, right? And with how do you manage that, right? Because the union and management can both be filled with great people, but then yet they have interests that don't align. So for example, if you have a union representative that comes to you and says, hey, we can't agree to this, how do you handle those complex negotiations to make sure that things can move forward smoothly?
Well, I'll use the example of Catalyst.
Okay.
Catalyst, I went in as a fly-in CEO. Company had lost $100 million in the first 6 months of 2010 and was radically spinning out of control. My board indicated to me we had massive union problems. We had problems in the community. So from that perspective, I wanted people to know me. So in the first 2 days, I met with the corporate office, got on a float plane, went over to the island, met with every one of my employees in groups of 200 to 500, right? Told them who I was, told them how we were going to operate, and subsequently each of them got a personalized copy of my operating philosophy. Said, here's the 7 or 8 things that we're going to do, and guess what? Things are going to change pretty rapidly. So from the union perspective, when people, I don't care if it's the board or operating executives, say we have union problems. Well, the union doesn't get to vote exclusively. You got a little bit of a management problem if you have union problems, right? So from my perspective, I wanted to let people know I was serious about how we're going to fix this. There was a union that was really way out in left field from my perspective. Catalyst was paying 23% more than any other paper company in North America. And they had a facility that was shut down because the union wasn't cooperative, and there was all sorts of other issues. So I went to the board and I said, and it was in a newsprint marketplace, and we didn't have enough fiber for it, and we didn't have enough customers. I said, we're going to shut this mill down. It had been shut down, but it was on sort of running with not producing anything, which was costing us $45 million a year. So it's done. We're done. 30 days into my tenure as a new CEO,
just got it. Yeah.
As the new CEO, I went to the board and said, we're going to take a $378 million impairment. So then I figured out they were going to support me in what I was going to do. The union freaked out and basically said, well, you should sell it to somebody else. I said, why should I do that? You've got billions of dollars of invested capital in here. That person, they're going to buy it that company's going to buy it 5 cents on a dollar, and they're going to compete with me for fiber that I don't even have to fund my other mills. So that was the first reality that, hey, I was serious. I was going to do things that were appropriate. And I think we wound up having a really good relationship with the unions out there. The other thing I did, which I think is key, and this goes back to my operating philosophy, there was a little bit of saber rattling and chest pounding by the union guys, which I'm sure I've done my fair share of it. They basically, we're going to go to Washington and we're going to figure out who you were. I said, go. You're going to figure out who I am. And they went. They talked to the machinists and the electricians and all the folks that I've dealt with for 25 years across, North America. And what they told them was, he's tough, he's fair, he won't lie to you, and don't lie to him. So from that perspective, they got a real sense that I was going to be fair and equitable. And we wound up having an extraordinary relationship that wound up being the key to getting Catalyst back on track, took it through bankruptcy, put it back in the TSX, et cetera. So I never believe anybody when they say they have union problems. I believe they have management and union problems.
How do you think you should go about properly handling layoffs in companies?
Well, and unfortunately, I've been, with restructuring and technology change, that's just part of the job. I think you have to be honest. I think you have to be quick. I think you have to be forthright. I think in many cases, if you're in a union environment, the rules set seniority, whatever. So it's and you have to be empathetic. So, in the union environments, the last guy in is the first guy out, which creates other problems we should talk about. Sure. And in a non-union environment, it's more, it should be the people that aren't pulling their weight or properly misplaced in a job need to be the people that go. Mm-hmm. And I think people understand that. They don't like it. But as long as you are getting people out of the organization that are not contributing, I think they understand it. They don't like it. And I think if you don't, then they're sitting there going, why didn't you guys figure out that those two people needed to go and not those two people? Mm-hmm. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
So quick, good communication, good follow-up communication, be empathetic, treat people fairly in a very harsh environment.
So I think one of Jack Welch, who was a huge player in the industry and
Sure.
what he was doing, they used one of his management philosophies, and I think they kind of put a negative connotation out. They called it the rank and yank.
Yeah, or whip the thoroughbreds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was right down in that part of the world, so Welsh was always on the radar screen. I met him. Interesting guy. He was a really good developer of talent.
Yeah. What did you think about him? I didn't know that you met him.
Yeah,
yeah.
he was a really good developer of talent. Like everybody else, he probably had a little bit of an ego. I would say a lot about an ego. He was strategic, but I think also as a manager, you have to start to sometimes be unemotional. I'll give you an example of that. So as we were doing acquisitions in the print business all around the country and the world, of course, we'd make an acquisition, let's say in St. Louis. And my guys that ran a division, let's say the magazine division, Johnny needs to go in there. He's been in the company 22 years, and I really like him. He's a good guy, And those guys that we acquired, they're a bunch of dopes. Why would we keep any of those guys? I said, well, we might because we bought them for a reason, that they had great EBITDA, they had great performance, they had great product knowledge, and I think that we should reconsider how we evaluate people. So I had, again, 15,000 people in the U.S. that worked in my group, and about 3,000 plus in Latin America, and they were more strategic and I wasn't tactically involved in the day-to-day in Latin America. But so I came up with the back of the baseball card theory. I went to my HR people and I said, hey, listen, I'm battling with a lot of people on who should get the next promotion. So when there's a variety, when you weed it down to a few of them, I want you to bring me the back of the baseball cards. And of course, they looked at me and said, "What are you talking about? I don't want to see their picture, and I don't want to see their name. I just want to look at their stats." And that wasn't the final decision, but many times I was able to unemotionalize emotional decisions, put the right executive in place for the right reasons, and be able to defend it. And so that is something that I do every day, and I've done that in some of the turnarounds that I've done. I've done it, but I've done it in some of the turnarounds I've done as a consultant, not as an employee. So, for me, that's an important part of acquisitions.
Was there some internal assessments that you guys did, or did you ever use any outside companies to do assessments on people?
I've been over the 40 years of my career, I've been through every different test and every consultant, and so we did a little bit of everything. And I'm a consultant now, and I'm not a big fan of consultants. The only time I'm a fan of consultants, if you're bringing somebody in that's a subject matter expert and can really help you. A general consultant to me goes to your employees and asks what's wrong. They get a book together. They decide really what's wrong, and they come back to management and said, "Hey, here's what's wrong." Management should be talking to their employees every day.
$300,000 later, or whatever it is.
Oh, $300,000. That's just for the leather folder.
Yeah, that's.
So
yeah. But going back quickly to differentiation, or rank and yank, what Jack will call it, is differentiation. So I believe, if I'm right, he called it the top 20,
right,
the middle 70, and the bottom 10.
Right.
And Jack gave an analogy. He said, in school, you're graded your whole life.
Right.
In sports, whatever it may be, you're cut from the team if you're not good enough. So he's like, if we grew up thinking this way and being graded like this, pass or fail,
right,
why is it that all of a sudden when we go into companies, it's maybe not, politically correct to say, hey, you're not keeping up? And what Jack also said, I wanted your opinion on this as well, is to let people know where they stand. And he had a culture of candor in an organization where you're upfront with people. And he said it's rude if you sack somebody and they might come back and say, well, I didn't even know I was performing badly. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you think what he calls it, not rank and yank, but differentiation, is that something that you think is fair in your mind to do for companies?
I believe people, first of all, have to have, all my executives And I did a really comprehensive look at 3 Down, right? And that was about 600 people, right? A lot of people. And each of those people had very stringent personal and business objectives, unemotional. Okay, so that was the unemotional part, right?
Yeah.
And then we looked at those executives and sort of said, who are the top 25? Because we're going to need people over here. We did an attrition study on how many people were going to retire naturally, and we need to have people ready. So we looked at their objectives, which they participated in and really drove by themselves. And then we put together pretty comprehensive development plans. I'm not talking, you're going to go take a class. I'm talking, I'm going to put you on a team. I'm going to take you out of your comfort zone. You're a sales guy. You're going to be put on this team, and we're going to put the best new press in the world in. And you're going to get a view of what it takes to what you're selling. And then I took, for example, we won a battle here in Buffalo against either win or lose. You lose, they close, the Buffalo plant would close. You win, you get all that work. I took a young engineering guy, and he was going to be in charge of putting this massive new amount of equipment in a very short term and managing this project. But I had a net around him. I put him up on a high wire. I had a net around him so I wouldn't destroy him if he had some failure. He flourished. He wound up becoming the general manager. So from your perspective, Yankin, people will normally disappear. And one of the things that a good executive does that I challenge is you have, let's say, 100 people in your business. The top 2%, you could treat them badly. You could yell at them. You could not support them. You know what? In their DNA, they're like a thoroughbred. They want to run, and they will do what's good for the company and good for them, regardless of the environment that
They're killers.
They're killers, right? You have 95% of the other people. If you treat that 2% well, and the rest, they'll move closer to the 2, and they'll expose the 3% of the group on the bottom that don't want to work, chronic, absenteeism, personal issues, whatever. And that, again, that's a fair way of dealing with large organizations. So that's sort of been part of my operating philosophy. That I've encouraged our executives to think that way.
The other parts, I believe when I looked at them, there were 7 on your operating philosophy. What are some others that we haven't touched on that you think are really relevant today and just in general in the future as well? Some management principles.
So I had. Let's concentrate on Catalyst, okay?
Yeah. Because
that was in the oil company too, but that Catalyst was probably the worst situation I walked into. It was 20 major printing, paper mills in North America, and paper mills are big. And they're complex, and they're dangerous. So I had in total about 40 million acres of process. 40 million acres. So
that's big.
And we were number 19 out of 20 in safety. And I said, this has got to stop. This is insane. Under my watch, we didn't lose anybody, but it's not uncommon to find out people die in paper mills from a variety of different things. So I met with the unions, and their solution was, well, we'll just put more people in the front of the plant, so when people come in, they'll have a bump cap, they'll have their chemistry set, so if there's gas or something, they can put it on their mouth. I said, no, that doesn't work. What we need to do is get every employee understanding that safety is their own personal requirement, not my requirement. I'll provide, as a CEO, president CEO, a safe operating environment. I will not allow you to push your safety up on somebody else's shoulders. We did that, and in 9 months, we went from number 19 to number 2. And
it's pretty darn good for 9 months.
And people people understood that I was trying, not just me, my management team was trying to help them. And when they embraced it, it was like wildfire. The other thing that I did, and people call it the Hawthorne effect. I've used it. Every factory I go in where I put new equipment, and all the lighting is spectacular. People working in the dungeon, you painted the whole bit. Even in factories that were light on capital. The other thing that I expect in that is I had huge machines. Each of them, if you replace them today, would be over $1 billion. They're 600-700 feet, 600-700 inches, wide, and running at 7,000 feet a minute. Just unbelievable machinery to create paper. Is I would have at that point a BlackBerry report that could tell you how long ago it was, and I'd be able to see every day the number of tons that came out of the mill, and everybody else would. But the commentary was, I don't want any world records that come with body parts. And people understood that if there was a safety issue, shut it down. But I expected you to be safe at the same time, include world-class, high-quality products. That worked. So that safety is always one of any business I've gone into. It's always, my scanner is always on, either as a consultant or as an executive. Mm-hmm. I think number 2 is financial responsibility.
Performance.
Everybody has an opportunity to contribute to the financial success of the company. And when you spell it out, and you go, well, what does that mean? Well, if you're in a purchasing department and you just click, 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 or are you looking at the right products? Are you looking at inventory? You're looking at damage. You're looking at waste. So every transaction within the company everybody needs to look at it as a way to improve technology. Everybody has a customer, internal or external. So I put together a pod theory that I've used in all my businesses, a productive office design. And people hated it. They hated it. So in a corporate office, unfortunately you talked about layoffs. I went in there and I took 40% of the corporate office out in the first 3 weeks. Some of that I pushed people back into the operating philosophies in the mills where they should be, and others they had to go. But let's say in here you had 6 or 8 different desks. I said, okay, we're going to be focused on business or process. Well, what does that mean? It means that we're going to have a customer service person here, we're going to have a salesperson here, we're going to have an accounting person here, we're going to have a logistics person. And in that pod, people had to move from a desk they were in 20 years. Well, but this is my desk. Well, now it's your desk, and here's your team. And what happened is, by osmosis, when they had a problem, well, what do we do here? Not that one person solved that. 6 other people could spin their chairs around and participate. So what was that? It was ongoing training. It was, when people got used to it, they wouldn't give that up. Today, it's still part of their philosophy.
Oh, sure.
So for me, don't if a customer calls and you're out, the pod person says, hey, Johnny's out, I'll take your message. I'll get back to you. Eliminated probably 80% of our internal email and progressed us at light speed toward better customer service. When we took the company through bankruptcy, everybody expected us to tank. Just the opposite. I gained market share. My customer service went through the roof, and my competition were like, what is going on here? So,
this is wild stuff.
The most complex problems don't require the most complex solutions. That's what I tell my executives. You don't have to recreate the world. Yeah. And then I expect people to make this. Let me rephrase this. I give people the opportunity I want them to make decisions at their level, but I want them to make a decision a half a notch up, because if you're bleeding out like Catalyst was, losing $10 million a month and it was getting worse.
Yeah.
There's not much you can wait on. So I wanted people to know that they had to make the decision that they were charged with. But if they saw something up here, make it. And if you make a mistake, I'm not going to persecute you. So when you
love that.
So when you get an organization moving at light speed,
You got to get out of their way a little bit.
you can.
Let them do. Yeah.
The other issue is communication. I expect people to communicate consistently, accurately, and honestly. And it was interesting. I just recently looked at something in my personal files and on my operating philosophy. One time I got an important document from a company that they wanted me to sign. Now, of course, they FedExed it to me in my office, so it had my name on it. But when I opened it up, it had "Dear Employee." Dear employee. I said, wait a minute. I am the group president for the group president. I'm not being egotistic here. I'm the group president for a $2 billion business, and you don't know who I am? You know who I am. So for me, I just said, how are all my employees going to react to that? So I told my people, if you ever send something out with "Dear Employee," I will fire you. How does a 35-year employee feel when he gets a Dear Employee letter?
No, that's unacceptable. Yeah.
Everything had to be personalized. And then, so from that perspective, there's things that you do. I demanded that my people in the operating facility were on the floor 3 times a day to see every employee, if they could. I did it when I was a operating guy, and it was a great way for me to get to know the employees and vice versa. Some of them got highly rewarded. I put all speed detectors on the equipment. I go, you're running at speed. The quality's great. Thank you. Right? A personal thank you. Look them in the eyes. Shake their hand. What's going on? Do you have a problem? No. Why? I said, you're running 20% below speed. Well, it's just more comfortable. I said, no. We're going to have business with your comfort. Let's go. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't always a great, never yelling, never screaming, just saying, let's go. If there was a part of a pallet on the floor and I'm walking down, I picked it up. If I could pick it up, I expected every other employee. My factories, you could eat off the floor because people knew that was the right thing to do. It was a safe environment.
And leading by example, you know?
The other thing that was necessary, and 7,000 employees in this paper company, started with that. There was less when I was done, unfortunately. But I had discussions with my first-line supervisors, and they said, "Are you really honest that you will take employee suggestions?" Yeah, for sure. Why wouldn't I? And in Vancouver, nobody wears a tie, but I would wear a sport coat. So I went out, and they called it the wood room. Well, the wood room wasn't a room. It was where they stored all the logs, out on the ocean that they would bring in and use. They were pulp logs. They weren't big logs, that would be used for lumber. But these were small logs that you couldn't use for lumber. So I went out there. These guys wanted to talk to me. It was misting, and the guy said, "Oh, we'll bring them in." I go, "No, I'm not gonna fade away if I get a little wet." I walked out, and there was 6 or 7 guys, all in these bright orange jumpsuits. They looked ZZ Tops. They had these really wild beards. And here we are out in the middle of beautiful British Columbia on the estuary. And they had these huge cranes, and they're picking up logs and, the whole bit. So I walked up, and they sort of looked me over and said, and the supervisor said to him, "These guys have something to tell you." I said, "Go ahead." "Well, if we do this, this, and this, we can save you $100,000 a month." I said, "Well, you're not saving me. You're saving the company." And I said, So I happened to have the logistics guy with me. I said, "Okay." I said, "Tomorrow we start doing what they said. I want it monitored, and if that's the case, we'll do more of it." They were right. So you know what happened? That was early in my tenure. That went through the organization. Like, he really wants to help, and I did. This was not a ploy. This was not set up.
No.
This is what you do when you are on the ground executive, and you understand that people in that mill, right, had the answers. When in my print business, I had 375,000 years of experience on the floor, right? So one of the things that I did is I started as what they call a subject matter expert, and went around and I asked people, the management supervisors, who's the best guy on ink? Who's the best guy on printing cylinders? Who's the best guy on whatever? And I got to 119 people, all validated. That list was pretty secret, let me tell you.
Okay, I
didn't want my competitors to find that list. Yeah. And so,
Try and poach them.
So, for example, we did Sports Illustrated in 7 or 8 plants. And if we had a problem with ink on Sports Illustrated, let's say they had some crazy compound color and we couldn't get it in a plant in California, they were able to call the plant in Pennsylvania and get that subject matter expert on the phone, solve it, right? So from there, I called that the neutron microscope theory. When you get 50 people looking at it, it doesn't solve itself. You at least identify the components and you go from there. Mm-hmm. So
much brain power all at once.
Yeah, an executive, you have to, if you're going to be successful in either restructuring or scaling or doing what you need to do as a senior executive, CEO, general manager, whatever, you need to mine the organization for talent. And from that perspective, that's another deficiency of a lot of companies across North America. They got a brain trust that sits in they believe it is everything.
Yeah.
And the companies that are moving at light speed, they're getting those employees involved, communicating with them.
So as the head, you lead and others govern, right? So it's more of kind of a macro lens versus micro, right?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I was deeply involved in the restructuring. In the financial discussions at every level with the bondholders, with the owners, et cetera. And at the same time, I've been an operating guy. I can walk in a factory, and again, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else, but because of all of the experiences I've had,
you've seen it
and
all
of the mentors I had, I can usually come in and pretty well determine how we're doing, how that company's doing. I was lucky enough to get a consulting arrangement where I could sleep in my bed at night, which is not usual. Usually you're in a Marriott and you're on an aisle seat on an American Airlines, like I did going out to the oil company when I ran the oil company, who had lost $1 billion, right? So,
or like Elon talking about sleeping in the plant,
exactly,
get things off the ground.
Exactly. That's not wacky. I mean, people think stuff like that's wacky. That's sometimes required.
Get the job done.
Yeah.
Yep. Not long term, but maybe for those short periods. And remember, these are turnarounds, like you're saying, right? So you got to be hands on all the time. I mean, like on average, like hours a week worked. What do you think you were pulling to do these?
Well, if I say this and my wife hears it, she'll drive me crazy. But probably 80 hours. I mean, the problem with working on the West Coast and being in an environment that, a lot of my customers are on the East Coast. You're almost available 18, 19 hours, right? Mm-hmm. So they're up and operating at 7, which is 4 o'clock in the morning, and people are calling you, And then when I, ran the oil company, my lenders were in Hong Kong, Australia, Indonesia. We used to have conference calls that we'd split, on the 12-hour basis. Sometimes I was up at midnight talking to them and vice versa. So it's and it's not the quantity of time, it's also the quality of time, So, I don't know how much longer we got. I want to share a few things for your audience, especially for young executives, I think are important. I'm going to use a list.
I was going to we can do it now. Yeah.
Okay, I want to get to this list, okay? So my favorite quote is from Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species or the most intelligent of the species that survives, but the one that's most adaptable to change. Change index for people is so hard. AKA great employees at the paper company that freaked out when I asked them to change their desk that they sat in for 20 years. I put them in a different environment that they were very unhappy about until they saw, oh my God, this made their job more interesting. It made them more powerful. It gave them, by osmosis, an enormous amount of knowledge, and it gave them huge promotional opportunities. So change is difficult, I can tell you. So
But when they see the benefits, then it's justified. Yep.
So from my perspective, here's the look at your change index. You know, make sure that you're willing to change. Off camera, we talked about a young executive that was out at a big company out in Seattle, and they asked him to go into the currency operation. He didn't want to get stuck there. Well, they had a better plan than he knew, and he took that change. I encouraged him. It flourished. His career flourished after that. Here's something that my dad, who I love dearly, is long gone, but he said to me as I'm walking down the front steps of my house to get on a plane to go to Niagara as a freshman. He pulled me aside and he said, listen, you're going to meet all sorts of different people. I want you to pay attention to everybody. And I'm like, what does that mean? Right? And he said, there are going to be people that you're going to look at and said, oh my God, I need to embrace what they're doing. They're showing me something that I should embrace and try to work. And
New
as other people,
yeah,
and as other people don't do what they're doing.
Don't be like them.
Don't be like them. So that's pretty simple.
Anchors and sales, right?
But don't make that decision. Don't just go, I'm not going to pay attention to Johnny. Listen, embrace that, and support that in your operating philosophy. The other thing is, in today's world, it's a lot easier. Commit to reading a variety of different things. Now, today I would encourage people to not count on pre-digested information, right? But look and challenge your thought process. Other thing, learn to value everybody in the workforce. They have an enormous opportunity to contribute if you allow them to contribute, right? And that's part of your job. I don't care who you are. If you're an accountant, you're an operating guy on the floor, you're the IT person, and I have no idea what you guys do, but you do normally help me. But whatever you do, look at your other IT people and see how they can help you. And here's one that I see often as a real complex problem for young executives. Another thing that my father shared with me. Everything in your life that you're going to get, you're going to give something up for. Mm-hmm. And this wasn't the first discussion. This was subsequent discussions during my tenure, because I used him as a sounding block. And he said, make sure what you get is worth more than what you give up. And I always thought, especially in my 20s and early 30s, I thought that was all monetary. And it really wasn't, right? So it's like, if you go and you love a job and you're unhappy because you're not a VP yet, and you just go because you want to be a VP, and you go in an environment that is not good, don't do that. Understand you're going to give stuff up to get stuff. So examine those decisions in your life. I think it's important. Lombardi time. Not a lot of people know what Lombardi time. Vince Lombardi said, if you're on time, you're late. I am a stickler for being on time. The first time I had
I can confirm that for this podcast today. I can confirm. Yep.
So the first time I had a meeting with my new staff in Vancouver, I said, I'll provide breakfast. The meeting starts at 8 a.m. sharp. 6 out of the 9 people were there. 8 o'clock, 8:02, lock the door. We're here for the meeting. I go, the meeting started at 8. Come back for the next meeting. I wouldn't let them in. It's important. You honor people, their time, from my perspective. Being late, unless it's some very, 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 very legitimate issue, you should never be late.
Agreed.
And we talked about this a little bit before. Make sure that in your career path, you don't give up opportunities to challenge yourself, right? Don't become a one-trick pony, I call it. Don't be the best person to do this, right? You're going to be this wide and 1,000 feet deep, unless you're going to, be a researcher and you're trying to solve some enormous problem in the world. Be somebody that's broad and deep, so that you if you want to attain significant tenure in a business or success, and it makes you a much more developed person. We're almost through here.
Yeah. No,
And
this is gold.
Then we'll go back to
This is gold. Yeah.
Okay.
Take notes, guys.
P&L and balance sheet. As a CEO, chairman of the board, I felt through my career, I knew the P&L and balance sheet as good as any of my CFOs. I had to. And I had to know it intuitively.
You got to know the numbers, or else
I would have P&Ls that would come in, consolidated for 40 plants. And when we had a problem, I said, okay, boys, let's get on a plane. We'd fly in and we'd have operating sessions. And I could look at labor ratios, waste. I could look at opportunities. I could look at energy. You've got to know it. I don't care if you're a salesperson, you're the IT person, you're HR, whoever you are, make sure you can read the balance sheet and understand the P&L. Just the way it is. Another issue, constantly work on your communication skills, both written and verbal. So if I'm communicating...
That was our workshop yesterday.
Yeah, if I'm communicating to 15,000 of my employees, it can't be 14 pages. It's got to be one extraordinarily well-written document if I want to communicate something that's important. And I would go through edit after edit after edit after edit, counsel from other people. But that's a skill that will serve you well. The ability to stand up in front of, 2, 3, I've done speeches in front of 12,000 people. No notes, just be prepared, get that done. And in big businesses, things will, if it's not well written, the rumor mill comes out, and then you'll be dealing with problems that you don't want to deal with. Be prepared for big surprises.
Oh, hello. Got some speed bumps in
Not only outside your organization, but inside your organization. So when I took the job at Catalyst, I flew out to the West Coast. My wife helped me get an apartment, and I went full battle stations in the middle of it. And during this process, in the first week, I found out two things. One, my lower management employees were suing the company on a class action basis based on some ridiculous thing. So, which the board didn't share with me, but we resolved that pretty quickly. The other issue when I and you have to deal with that emotionally, be decisive. The other issue, when I took over the oil company, it lost $1 billion. And it's almost impossible to lose $1 billion, but they did. And again, within the first month, my attorney comes in to me and he says, I have to talk to you. And he was very nervous. And I said, come on, what's going on? Well, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are outside. I said, uh-oh. Oh, boy. I jaywalk all the time, and I did in Calgary. So I said, okay, I was making a joke.
How dare you?
He goes, no, they're here based on the bribery case. I go, what bribery case? Oh, that was 10 years ago. We were convicted of a bribery, and we paid a $10 million fine, and we're getting off probation. I said, well, nice that somebody would tell me about that at this point. Last 2 points, and we can go back to the operating information, but I want to make sure we got this out. So be courageous about your own development. So I use a process throughout all the businesses that I've run to help the employees give me quick feedback. And it's called start, stop, and continue. So if you're really, really courageous and you're married, give this form to your wife. So it's like, what are the 5 things I should stop doing that is a problem for my toolkit? Well, you know what? You tie your tie backwards. Okay, stop doing that. What should I start doing that somebody else does that I don't do? That would create great value for you, Kevin, right? And then what should I continue doing? What are your strengths? So if you give that, and I would require my senior executives to put that in the pool and let everybody evaluate them. They could do it anonymously or they could put their name on it. That feedback is very, very powerful. And, so if you were courageous enough to do that, do it with 5 or 6 people you trust. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get, if they're honest, they'll give you some feedback that will be extraordinarily helpful for you. And the last thing I want to share with you is, during your career, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be missed opportunities. There are going to be things that you're going to regret. Leave them behind. There's nothing you can do about them. Okay? Leave them behind. Go forward. Understand, you can correct them. Take what you do seriously, but don't take who you are seriously. It's a big difference. If your company has a private jet and you're on the private jet all the time, don't make that what's important to you. That's a functional opportunity to make you more productive. If you got a corner office with special furniture, okay. Be who you are and be successful by leaving your problems and your mistakes behind. Go forward and trust that you can make progress. And I've seen so many people, so many young executives accelerate their careers and work in an environment that they don't have a job. I don't believe I've ever had a job. I've always been lucky to do what I've done. Now there's points in time where I've been a little stressed, 15-hour flight to Hong Kong to meet with my lenders and then have
that might do it a little bit.
Have breakfast and lunch with them and then get on a plane and fly 15 hours back. That was a little stressful. But other than that, I've enjoyed a career that I've surely contributed to. I've reached out for lots of consultation. My dad was a remarkable guy, and he gave me a lot of real wisdom. And then I had great mentors. I worked for billionaires. And regardless of what you think of them, most of them want people to be successful.
Oh, I agree.
And most of them treat people enormously positive. So I will go back to your agenda. I'm sorry, but
no, that's okay.
I wanted to make sure.
That was really good.
I wanted to
make sure. That was a master class in what to do versus what not to do from someone who's done.
I just want to make sure that that's important. I want to share that, and if people really think about it, and then put your own examples in those things in your life, either ones you've already experienced, or things you're challenged now, or things that you want to do in your career ahead.
No, that was good, because before we close, I have one more question that's based on that. But before I get to that, when we were talking about your operational philosophy, okay, is there one thing that we haven't touched out of the 7 that's one that you quickly want to touch on that was a big part of that made a difference in Catalyst and some of the other organizations you mentioned you were a part of and doing turnarounds and helping them?
Well, I think they're all connected, but, first of all, getting the attention of the workforce in a very dire situation is important, right? And I won't beat up the executive in front of me, but he had a different operating philosophy. He was a tower guy. Never really got to the plans. Sent down dictates to the employees and said, "Here, I'm smarter than everybody else." I'm sure he didn't mean that, but and I was just the opposite. I wanted to educate my employees, not irritate them. I wound up educating the towns and the provinces where we did business. My predecessor lost to the Supreme Court of Canada a tax case that was costing us $11 or $12 million a year extra. And I went into the communities, and that was one of my objectives in looking at how I could put together a plan to take Catalyst run rate neutral at $100 million in the first 6 months of 10. And I was able to go to the community. I took a lot of bruises, but I was honest. And I just said, here's the facts. We pay the largest mill rate of any mill in North America.
Yeah.
In Canada.
Right.
How is it? Because we were paying for libraries, or, so you have to be judicial, right? So we lost that. The company lost that before I got there, and we wound up by educating the employees and the community. We wound up turning that around for an $11 million savings and a much better relationship with what would be the equivalent of the mayors in these towns and the woman that was sort of the governor of BC. Mm-hmm. So, and treat people respectfully, communicate well to them, make sure they understand their part in the orchestra, mm-hmm. and give them the authority and give them the respect. And 99.9% of the times, and be creative. Here's another. So in BC, we're going to take the company through bankruptcy, for a large amount of reasons, currency, waste, and whatever. When I took the company over, it had an 82-cent dollar, and the Canadian dollar went to $1.03 against the U.S. dollar. Every cent was $8 million of arbitrage. So right off that was a $160 million headwind that we had to deal with. So from that perspective, we had to take the company through bankruptcy. And we went through, and again, we took the company through, we were very public with all our communication. Our employees' unions and both embraced it, and of course our lenders and shareholders did. So from that perspective, communication, involvement, and one of the things we looked at is in BC, through the bankruptcy process, our, I think it was defined benefit plan would be frozen, right? So it was funded at 68% in a market where interest rates were 1%.
Yeah.
Right? So I said to the employees, I said, listen, what I want you to do, I want you to consider is I'll give you your money. And I'll give you 4% the first year and 4%. So you're guaranteed to go to 76 or whatever, 78 cents, I forget what it was.
And then you'll own it. Your growth will be your growth. But once we do this, it's fixed. You're going to get that 68%, and that's it, right? So we explained that, and 97% of the people elected to do that. 2 years later, they had gotten to 108%. So when you do those creative things, and we fought the BC government like hell to get that done, but then you have credibility.
Bingo.
I'll tell you, one of the most defining memories I have of my Catalyst term, and it was lots of them, was one of those initial discussions, 30 days in. I went to a plant in Powell River in the middle of nowhere. And it was at one point the largest paper mill in the world, right? And I went there and I spoke to 700 or 800 people at a time. And there was one guy that gave me a really hard time. And I was great. Okay, I went through the whole process in front of 700 people, answered his questions. And so when we came back to announce that the company was coming out of bankruptcy and this was going to happen and all these good things and requirements were going to happen, people were happy. And as I was walking out of this huge hall, and this was a mill where people lived. They had a mill store, they had a hospital, they had all these things when you go back, right?
The whole thing, whole package.
So this gentleman came up to me and he says, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Sure." He says, "Do you remember me?" I said, "Yeah, I remember your face, but I have no context as why." He says, "I was the guy in the back of the room giving you an enormous hard time when you told us everything you were going to do, you and your team." I said, "Okay, now I remember you." And I laughed.
Yeah.
I didn't, but I didn't remember him. He said to me, I need to apologize to you. And he said, if I had the courage, I would have stood up in front of those 700 people and told every one of them that I needed to apologize. Everything that you told us you did, or you tried to do. Wow. He said, so I said, and he was he was almost remorseful. He was remorseful. I said, let's say his name was John. I said, John, you know what? We're here. Let's not look backwards. Just figure out that we're going to continue to do what we got to do, and you and everybody else in here has got to do the same thing. So, as a CEO, you get rewards like that. There's nothing that you can monetize that with. It became a memory for me that I will keep. Amazing. That I will keep forever.
That's amazing. I think out of all on the list that you had of things that that really resonated with me, and I'm sure a lot of young professionals in the audience, one that you could touch on to close with this is past mistakes, right? And you said, let them go and move on. I think a lot of young people, whether it was a big mistake personally or professionally, they think it defines them, and they carry that weight with them. They carry that baggage with them, and it stops them from getting out of their comfort zone, trying new things, being creative, and getting out of that rut to say, I got my whole life ahead of me.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people?
Well, first of all, you're going to make them. And most of the time, you're the only one that thinks it's catastrophic, right? I'll give you an example. I became in the Cheeseboro Ponds, which was this huge, massively marketing company. Like I said, they had Ragu Adolphs, they had Prince tennis rackets, they had Health-X baby clothes, Bass shoes, Q-tips, Bass makeup, blah blah blah. And I had achieved at 29 what most people didn't achieve at 40. I found out that my boss at the time was turning down director jobs for me. I had 3 kids, living in Connecticut, commuting to Greenwich. Shirley was fairly compensated, but we didn't eat steak every night. I can tell you that. So when I found out that he had blocked me on 2 or 3 jobs, it would have probably doubled or tripled my income. I just said, okay, I'm done. I went off and wound up getting a good job. But, I think I was lucky in that regard. I think I probably should have sat down and given that a little more thought process. So, sometimes, you're forced to make decisions, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. But just realize that, those things are going to happen. And you're going to take them a lot more painfully than the guy in front of you. I'm the chairman of the athletic department at Niagara University. So is it the first basket that somebody misses, or the last basket if we lose the game? Or is it the first basket somebody makes, or the last basket that we win the game? Right? So it's a team effort, right? And look at the Bills. Is it one field goal or is it a touchdown? So that person that missed the field goal, and he's feeling pretty nasty going in that locker room. The guy who caught the touchdown pass to win the game, he's on the top of the world. That team contributed. So, I it's hard to share, and I thank you for the opportunity. For 40 years of a career that I've managed more than 50 or 60,000 people. I've been fortunate. I've managed in 4 or 5 different continents. I've traveled the world. I've been to 60 or 70 different countries. That in itself is an education. And I'll share another bit of wisdom. So I forget, I was in some CEO conference, actually at Pebble Beach. And of course, there was random people that was sat left and right of you. And somebody said to me, where'd you get your MBA? I said, on American Airlines. He goes, what? I said, I had 3 kids. I was traveling the world. and there was no way I could go back and get an MBA, but I got it on an aisle seat on American Airlines. I got it through walking through tens of thousands of square feet of meeting some extraordinary mentors, including Jack Welch, which was sort of a handshake. Other people, noted people in the industry. So, again, going back to my father's advice, listen to everybody, and make sure you embrace what the people you admire, and the people that are perhaps doing things that you shouldn't do. Make sure you don't overlook them as well.
What an episode, guys. This was great. And Kevin, thanks so much for coming on. This has been fantastic, and I'm glad that my audience had the opportunity to learn from your years of experience.
If there's follow-up questions that come into you, send them to me. I'll be happy to give you, be happy to give you some of my perspective. And you can share it subsequently down the road, perhaps in other podcasts. But it's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Cool.
I had a suit on for a wedding this weekend, but other than that, I don't usually wear a suit.
I love it. Two dapper guys just sitting down and having a conversation, right?
For sure.
Kevin, thank you so much.
Thanks.